BBC News with Sue Montgomery. Negotiators at the UN climate conference in Egypt are working late into the night to try to reach a deal after 2 weeks of talks. A major agreement on giving money to developing countries for loss and damage already caused by global warming appears close to completion. However, progress on the new fund and related issues has been slow, as our climate editor, Justin Rolat, who's in Sharm el-Sheikh, explains.
Despite having been something that's been discussed by developing nations for 30 years, not only did it get on the agenda, but by hook or by crook, this has been a very, very chaotic conference. The Egyptians look like, we're not there yet, but they look like they might have got it through. And if they have, that would be a historic development in terms of climate action and in climate justice too. It also has very interesting funding arrangements which might open up opportunities for new flows of funding, for example, from the World Bank and the IMF. So it is actually a very innovative and interesting deal if it goes through, and that's what we're waiting for.
The US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has accused Russia and China of trying to create an international order based on force. At a security conference in the Canadian city of Halifax, General Austin said failing to help Ukraine could lead to tyranny and turmoil elsewhere. He described China's military activities in the Taiwan Strait as increasingly provocative.
Beijing, like Moscow, seeks a world where might makes right, where disputes are resolved by force and where autocrats can stamp out the flame of freedom. As President Biden said this week after his meeting with President Xi, there need not be a Cold War, but we remain clear-eyed about the China challenge.
The British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has offered Ukraine an additional $60 million worth of military aid. It was his first visit to Kiev since taking office. After meeting President Zelensky, Mr Sunak said it was deeply humbling to be in the city. Here's Ione Wells.
In terms of the support that's been announced today, it is significant. Ukraine's been asking for more assistance from Western nations in recent months, particularly after some pretty intense aerial attacks on the country. And a big part of this package is anti-aircraft guns to counter these deadly Iranian-supplied drones. This comes after a week where Russia has hit Ukraine with one of its biggest onslaughts of missiles yet, days after Russian troops were forced to withdraw from Kherson.
Canada's intelligence service says it's investigating credible reports of death threats from Iran made against people living in the country. The service said these seem designed to silence those who speak out publicly against Iran. On Wednesday, Canada sanctioned Iran for the 5th time this year, targeting individuals responsible for human rights abuses. World News from the BBC. The official in charge of NASA's Orion spacecraft program has told the BBC that humans could be living on the moon within this decade. Howard Hu said the module's unmanned launch on Wednesday was the first step to long-term deep space exploration. He said establishing a human presence on the lunar surface will be key to supporting future scientific missions into space. At least 20 people have died as a result of floods and landslides in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Officials say most of the victims died at a gold mining site in Rubaya in North Kivu province. An official from a local mining organisation said some people were missing underground. Officials in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region have accused Eritrean forces of committing widespread human rights abuses against civilians and ignoring the recent ceasefire. Eritrean troops have assisted the Ethiopian military in its 2-year fight against Tigrayan rebels. Will Ross reports.
The Tigrayan officials have accused the Eritrean president, Isaias Afwerki, of deploying more troops to Tigray. They said the Eritrean soldiers had been sexually assaulting women, killing civilians and looting property. The government in Asmara has not responded, and it's not been possible to verify the reports of violence. Since the Ethiopian government and Tigrayan officials signed the recent cessation of hostilities, there's been some progress. More humanitarian aid has been delivered, but there are still major obstacles to overcome.
The Governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, has deployed more than 100 members of the National Guard as a snowstorm batters western parts of the state. She said they would work across Erie County, the worst hit area, which is seeking federal emergency funds. Nearly 2 metres of snow has fallen in some parts of New York State. BBC News.